The rain pattered softly on the cobblestone streets of New York City, draping a thin mist over the towering skyscrapers. Evelyn Carter, 26, hurried along under a faded green umbrella, her flats speckled with mud. Her soft brown hair clung to her cheeks, damp from raindrops slipping through the umbrella's gaps. She clutched her handbag tightly, shielding the job application documents inside from the wet. Today was her last chance, a preschool teacher interview at a small private school in Manhattan. Evelyn's life lately had been a series of slammed doors. Losing her tutoring job, mounting bills, and pressure-filled calls from her family in Ohio urging her to give up the city dream and return home. But Evelyn wouldn't quit. She loved children, loved how they saw the world with clear, untainted eyes, and she believed she was born to teach them. Standing before a low-rise office building, Evelyn checked the address on her phone. "This is it," she muttered, smoothing her beige wool dress, trying to look professional despite her inner turmoil. She stepped into the lobby where a man in a black suit, stern and composed, awaited. "Miss Carter?" he asked, his voice deep and emotionless. Evelyn nodded, surprised he knew her name. "Follow me. The car's waiting." "Car?" Evelyn frowned, but the man was already turning, opening the door to a sleek black SUV parked outside. The rain persisted, and she had no time to question. Perhaps the school was thoughtful enough to send a car for candidates, she told herself, though a flicker of unease stirred within. She climbed into the vehicle, the cold leather seat making her shiver. The driver said nothing more, navigating through crowded streets away from downtown toward an upscale suburban neighborhood. Evelyn gazed out the window as skyscrapers gave way to lush, green trees and grand mansions hidden behind iron gates. "There must be some mistake," she whispered, but didn't dare ask. The car stopped before a stately white mansion, its gray-tiled roof and towering windows glimmering faintly in the dim, rainy morning light. Evelyn stepped out, clutching her bag, feeling as though she'd stumbled into a world not her own. The driver led her through a large gate into a marble-floored foyer. Inside, the vast space felt cold, more like a museum than a home. An older woman, likely the housekeeper, appeared. "You're the new nanny?" she asked, her eyes scrutinizing. "Nanny? No, I'm here to interview for a preschool teacher position," Evelyn replied, her voice slightly shaky. But before she could explain further, a deep, icy voice echoed from the wooden staircase behind. "You're late. I don't like waiting." Evelyn turned, her heart skipping a beat. The man standing there was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, but it was his eyes, piercing blue, cold as ice, that held her. Grant Whitmore, 32, CEO of a billion-dollar tech empire, descended the stairs with commanding presence. He glanced briefly at Evelyn, her rain-soaked brown hair, gentle eyes, and simple dress, then turned to the housekeeper. "This is the new nanny for Lucas. Take her to his room." "Wait, sir, I think there's a mistake," Evelyn interjected, her voice small but firm. "I'm not a nanny. I'm here for a teaching interview." "You're from the agency, correct?" Grant cut her off, not bothering to look at her, flipping through Sony Ericsson Xperia Ray smartphone released in 2011 through papers on the table. "I don't have time for this. Lucas needs someone to care for him, and you've been selected. Do a good job. That's all I ask." His tone was final, leaving no room for argument. He turned and disappeared down the hall before Evelyn could respond. Evelyn stood frozen, mouth agape, unable to speak. The housekeeper, Mrs. Helen, sighed. "The master is very busy. Go meet Lucas first, and I'll explain later." With no other choice, Evelyn nodded, her mind reeling with questions. Mrs. Helen led her to the second floor, down a long hallway lined with oil paintings, to a white wooden door. "Lucas is in here," she said, her tone softer. "He's not easy to reach. Be patient." Mrs. Helen knocked, then opened the door. Inside was a bright, spacious room, filled with toys but eerily silent. A boy, about 5, with blonde hair and eyes identical to Grant's, sat on the rug, clutching a worn teddy bear. Lucas looked up, his gaze blank, devoid of emotion. Evelyn smiled, kneeling to his level. "Hi, I'm Evelyn. What are you playing with?" No response. Lucas stared, his eyes assessing her like an adult's. Evelyn didn't falter. She pointed to the bear. What's this guy's name? I'm guessing Mr. Fluffy? Lucas's lips twitched, almost a smile, but he held it back. She kept talking, her voice gentle, sharing a story about baking cookies with kids at her old preschool. She didn't push him to speak, just stayed present. Then unexpectedly, Lucas stood and stepped closer. Before Evelyn could react, he wrapped his arms around her, his small face buried in her shoulder. "Mommy?" he whispered, his voice trembling, as if afraid she'd vanish. Evelyn froze, her heart constricting. She glanced at Mrs. Helen, who stood at the door, eyes wide with shock. From the hallway, footsteps halted. Grant, returning to check on them, stood rooted at the threshold. Old pain surged within him. Anna, the wife he loved more than life, had died shortly after Lucas's birth. For 5 years, Grant had lived as a shadow, existing only for his son. Lucas had never called anyone mommy. Yet now his boy clung to a stranger, a woman whose real name he didn't even know. "Lucas," Grant called, his voice hoarse, but the boy didn't let go of Evelyn. Evelyn was at a loss, unsure what to do. She wanted to explain, to leave, but Lucas's pleading eyes and tiny hands gripping her shirt anchored her. I'll stay a bit, okay?" she whispered, looking at Lucas. He nodded, his eyes lighting up for the first time. Grant turned away, silent, his fists clenched. He didn't know if he was angry or afraid. The room fell quiet, save for the rain tapping the windows, like a soundtrack to a story just beginning. Evelyn Carter stood in the vast kitchen of the Whitmore mansion, light streaming through towering windows onto the gleaming marble floor. Everything in this house, from the ornate crystal chandelier to the pristine porcelain dishes, made her feel out of place, as if she'd stepped into a world not hers. But it wasn't the opulence that unnerved her most. It was the bizarre situation she was trapped in. She wasn't a nanny, hadn't signed a contract, and certainly wasn't trained to care for a child like Lucas. Yet the moment the 5-year-old clung to her, whispering, "Mommy," with desperate eyes, her heart softened. She couldn't leave, though logic screamed to clear up the misunderstanding immediately. Mrs. Helen, the housekeeper with neatly tied silver hair, had arranged for Evelyn to stay temporarily in a small guest room on the 3rd floor. "The master will review your file later," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "For now, look after Lucas. He needs you." Evelyn nodded, though her mind was a tangle of confusion. She'd planned to call the hiring agency to sort things out, but each time she saw Lucas, silently clutching his worn teddy bear in the corner, she hesitated. "Just a few days," she told herself, smoothing her white shirt sleeve, trying to keep it dry in the rain. "Then I'll go." The next morning, Evelyn woke early, slipping into a light blue sweater and jeans. She entered the dining room, where Lucas sat alone, a bowl of untouched cereal before him. He looked up as she approached, his green eyes, identical to his father's, flickering briefly before retreating to wariness. "Morning, Lucas," Evelyn smiled, pulling up a chair beside him. "What do you like for breakfast? I could make pancakes if you're up for it." Lucas didn't answer, his small hands gripping the teddy bear. Evelyn didn't push. She stood, rummaging through the kitchen cabinets, a daunting task in a space organized like a 5-star restaurant, and found pancake mix. "Let me tell you something," she said, mixing batter, her voice cheerful. "When I was a kid, my brother and I made pancakes every Sunday. But once I added way too much salt, and everyone's faces scrunched up." She laughed, glancing at Lucas. The corner of his mouth twitched, a tiny smile that warmed her heart. Breakfast ended with slightly burnt pancakes, but Lucas ate one, even drizzling syrup on it. Evelyn counted it as a small victory, but when she looked up, she caught Grant Whitmore at the doorway, coffee mug in hand, his piercing blue eyes fixed on her. "You did well," he said, his voice low and flat. "Lucas doesn't usually eat breakfast." Before she could reply, he turned and left, leaving a chill in his wake. Evelyn sensed the invisible wall around Grant. He appeared fleetingly, always in crisp black suits, always buried in calls or thick stacks of papers. He didn't ask her name, didn't check her background, only issued curt orders through Mrs. Helen. "Ensure Lucas is fine." But each time he saw her playing with Lucas, his gaze lingered, as if wrestling with something deep within. She didn't know what, but his heavy eyes stirred both curiosity and pity in her. On the third day, Evelyn decided to try a creative activity to connect with Lucas. She'd noticed he liked drawing, though his sketches were often sad, scribbled circles. In the expansive living room, she spread out colored paper, crayons, and a jar of glitter on the walnut table. "Lucas, want to make a card today?" she asked, her voice brimming with excitement, like inviting him on an adventure. "A really special one, for someone you love." Lucas looked at her, his big eyes skeptical. "For who?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Evelyn knelt to his level, smiling softly. "For your mom in heaven. I think she'd love getting a card from you." She wasn't sure if the idea was too sensitive, but she wanted Lucas to feel his mother was still part of his life, even through memories. Lucas was silent, his gaze dropping to the teddy bear. Then he nodded, slowly, as if making a weighty decision. He picked a blue sheet of paper, his small fingers brushing its surface. "Because Mom liked the sky," he said, his voice soft but clear, sharing a private detail for the first time. Evelyn's heart tightened, but she held her smile, not wanting to break the fragile moment. She sat beside Lucas, guiding him to fold the paper, add glitter, and draw a big star in the center. "Mom will see this star from up there," she said, pointing at the ceiling as if the sky were above. Lucas nodded, coloring the star with a yellow crayon, his tongue peeking out in concentration. Evelyn watched quietly, sensing a subtle shift. He wasn't the silent boy curled in a corner anymore, but a child trying to send love through each stroke. When the card was done, Lucas held it up, studying it with rare pride. The golden star gleamed under the light, glitter dusting his hands like stardust. Then suddenly he ran to Evelyn, hugging her tightly, his small face pressed into her shoulder. "Do you think Mom will like it?" he asked, his eyes shining, his first radiant smile since she'd arrived. Evelyn hugged him back, fighting tears. "I'm sure she'll love it," she said, stroking his soft blonde hair. "You did an amazing job, Lucas." His smile was like sunlight breaking through New York's persistent rain clouds, warming the cold room. From the corner, Grant stood silently, phone in hand, but his eyes no longer on the screen. He'd meant to check on Lucas before a meeting, but the scene stopped him. Lucas's smile, something he'd rarely seen since Anna's death, pierced his heart, like an old wound reopening. He looked at Evelyn, the unfamiliar woman with loosely tied brown hair and warm eyes, holding his son with a patience and gentleness that felt familiar yet foreign. A strange feeling stirred. Gratitude for Lucas's smile, but fear of emotions he didn't want to face. He'd built a wall around his heart for 5 years, and now this woman seemed to shake it. He turned away before Evelyn noticed, his steps heavy on the wood floor. But the image of Lucas's smile, the blue card with its golden star, and Evelyn's gentle eyes haunted him, a melody he couldn't shake. In the days that followed, Evelyn settled into the mansion's rhythm. She took Lucas to the backyard garden, where red roses bloomed despite the drizzle. She showed him how to spot caterpillars, shared stories of butterflies from her Ohio hometown, and laughed when Lucas grimaced at a tiny worm on his hand. She read him bedtime stories, choosing tales of knights and dragons so he could dream of adventures. Lucas began to talk more, in short bursts. "Did you know dragons breathe fire?" Or, "My bear's name is Teddy," and sought her out when scared or sad, as if she were his safe haven. But with Grant, a chasm remained. Evelyn sensed his pain, though he never spoke of it. His eyes, though cold, carried a sorrow she couldn't fathom. She saw him late at night in his study, the lamp casting shadows on his tired face through the cracked door. She heard his sharp tone on phone calls as if the world was just a spreadsheet to solve, and she noticed he never smiled, never showed a hint of joy, as if happiness was something he no longer believed in. One evening, as Evelyn cleared the table after a simple dinner with Lucas, Mrs. Helen entered the kitchen, her eyes kind but pointed. "You're doing better than I expected," she said, her voice low. "Lucas has changed since you came, but the master, he doesn't open up easily. Don't push him, all right?" Evelyn nodded, but a resolve grew within her. She didn't just want to help Lucas smile. She wanted this family, even the man with the sad eyes, to find joy again. But how do you reach a heart that's locked away? She had no answer, but each time Lucas hugged her, each time he spoke of Mom in heaven with pride, she vowed not to give up. That weekend, with rain still falling, Evelyn set up an indoor picnic to cheer Lucas up. She spread a large blanket on the living room floor, laid out homemade cookies and apple juice, and invited Lucas to camp with her. He was thrilled, even dragging Teddy, his bear, to join. Evelyn spun a tale about a rabbit adventuring on the moon, her voice animated, making Lucas giggle, his eyes sparkling like stars. As she described the rabbit leaping over a crater, she heard soft footsteps. Grant appeared at the doorway, his white shirt sleeves rolled up, his tired but curious eyes watching. "Dad, sit with us!" Lucas cheered, running to tug his hand. Grant hesitated, his gaze flicking to Evelyn, weighing his choice. But at Lucas's insistence, he sat on the blanket, slightly awkward, as if unaccustomed to family moments. Evelyn smiled, handing him a cookie. "Mr. Whitmore, this is a VIP treat," she teased, her tone light. Grant raised an eyebrow, a hint of a smile crossing his lips. He took the cookie, biting a small piece, and for a fleeting moment, as Lucas laughed, recounting the flying rabbit, Evelyn saw Grant's eyes soften, as if recalling a happier version of himself. She watched him, hoping to hold on to the moment, but he quickly looked away, his gaze distant again. Evelyn knew this journey wouldn't be easy. Grant was a puzzle she couldn't yet solve, a heart deeply wounded. But each of Lucas's smiles, each fleeting softness in Grant's eyes, were small pieces, and she was determined to fit them together into a complete picture, a real family. Evelyn Carter had been at the Whitmore mansion for nearly 2 weeks, and though she still hadn't clarified the initial misunderstanding, she couldn't deny that Lucas had become a vital part of her life. The 5-year-old with blonde hair and blue eyes no longer shrank into corners, but laughed more, shared innocent stories, and even sang along with her to nursery rhymes. But Grant Whitmore, Lucas's cold and distant father, remained an enigma. He appeared fleetingly, always in pristine black suits, his voice sharp when issuing orders through Mrs. Helen. Yet Evelyn noticed that when he watched her play with Lucas, his eyes weren't entirely emotionless. A deep sadness lingered there, and she wondered what had frozen a man like him. Evelyn knew little about Grant, but Mrs. Helen, in a rare moment of openness, shared a glimpse. "The master wasn't always like this," she said one evening as they cleaned the kitchen after dinner. "He used to be cheerful, always smiling, but since Miss Anna passed, it's like he lost part of his soul." Evelyn didn't press further, but the words haunted her. Anna, Lucas's mother, Grant's wife, was the key to understanding him, and Evelyn began to realize his pain wasn't just loss, but unrelenting self-blame. Grant Whitmore met Anna Thompson in his sophomore year at Columbia on a golden autumn afternoon. She stood under a red maple, her blonde hair glowing in the sunlight, a French literature book in hand. He, an ambitious young man dreaming of a tech empire, was instantly drawn to her gentle smile and sharp wit. Anna wasn't like other girls he'd met. She wasn't swayed by his grand plans, but loved how he quietly brought her coffee each morning, or blushed when she teased him for dozing in philosophy class. They fell in love over long nights debating Baudelaire's poetry, impromptu picnics at Coney Island, and promises to conquer the world together. When Grant launched his first tech company, Anna stood by him, always supportive, though she craved a simple life of morning reading by the window. They married at 25 in a small ceremony at Anna's family garden in Connecticut, surrounded by lavender and flickering candles. Grant once believed nothing could tear them apart, until Anna became pregnant with Lucas. Pregnancy was hard on Anna. She was often exhausted but always smiled, saying every struggle was worth it for their son. Grant, despite his growing company, tried to be there, holding her hand at every appointment, promising to name their son Lucas after Anna's grandfather. But when the delivery day came, everything shattered. Anna went into premature labor, and postpartum complications took her from him. Grant still remembered that moment in the cold hospital room when the doctor placed Lucas, a tiny wailing boy, into his arms. He held his son, eyes fixed on Anna, who was slipping away. "Take care of Lucas," she whispered weakly before closing her eyes forever. Grant held Lucas all night, not crying, not speaking, just staring at his son with a shattered heart. He blamed himself. If he hadn't let her get pregnant, if he'd gotten her to the hospital sooner, if he hadn't been so consumed by work, Anna might still be here. From then on, he buried his emotions, locked his heart, and lived only for Lucas. Work became his refuge, a place he could control. Unlike the life that stole his greatest love, he feared loving again, feared happiness, because every time he'd been happy, it vanished like sea foam. Evelyn didn't know the full story, but she felt Grant's pain in fleeting moments. When she told Lucas bedtime stories, she saw him linger at the door, his eyes heavy. When she and Lucas played tag in the garden, she caught him watching from the balcony, his hand gripping the railing. He rarely spoke, but his eyes were a closed book filled Evelyn wanted to read, even just once. She didn't push him to open up. Instead, she focused on Lucas, who was slowly blooming under her care. She taught him to paint vibrant pictures, helped him write short stories about Knight Lucas, saving princesses, and even baked cookies with him, though they mostly made a flowery mess. Lucas laughed more, hugged her tighter, and sometimes called her Miss Ev with affection. But Evelyn knew that despite his growing happiness, Lucas needed his father, and Grant, though he wouldn't admit it, needed someone to pull him from the darkness. One afternoon, Lucas brought home a flyer from preschool, his eyes sparkling but tinged with worry. "Miss Ev, school's having a Mother's Day event," he said, handing her the paper. I don't have a mom to bring." His voice faded, and Evelyn's heart clenched. She knelt, taking his hand. "Lucas, I know your mom's in heaven, but if you want, I can come with you. What do you think?" Lucas looked up, eyes shining. "Really? You'll be my mom for a day?" He hugged her tightly and Evelyn nodded, though she worried about Grant's reaction. She couldn't let Lucas feel alone on such a day. Mother's Day arrived on a rare clear Saturday in New York. Evelyn wore a modest floral dress, holding Lucas's hand as they entered the schoolyard adorned with banners. Other mothers chatted lively, kids ran around showing off handmade cards. Lucas, in a crisp green shirt, clung to Evelyn's hand, but beamed as he introduced her to friends. "This is my Miss Ev," he said proudly, and when another boy asked, "Is she your mom?" Lucas hesitated, then smiled. "Yeah, for today she is." Evelyn fought tears, hugging Lucas close. She guided him through activities, making paper flower crowns, drawing family portraits, and even dancing goofily in a Mom and Me game. Lucas's laughter rang like silver bells, and Evelyn's heart swelled with joy. But when she looked up, she spotted a familiar figure by the school fence. Grant, in a simple white shirt, stood silently, his eyes fixed on her and Lucas. Grant hadn't planned to come. He'd told Mrs. Helen to take Lucas, unable to bear a day celebrating the mother Lucas had lost. But that morning, he couldn't stay in his office. He drove to the school just to see his son from afar. But watching Lucas hold Evelyn's hand, seeing him laugh and proudly show off his mom, Grant's throat tightened. Tears slid down his cheeks, the first in 5 years. Not from grief, but because Lucas was happy, truly happy, in a way Grant hadn't thought possible. And Evelyn, the woman he'd dismissed as a temporary nanny, was doing what he couldn't, bringing light to his son's life. He wiped his tears, turning away before Evelyn saw. But that moment shifted something in him. He couldn't deny Evelyn was more than a caretaker. She was becoming indispensable to Lucas, and perhaps to his own heart. Evelyn didn't see Grant, but she sensed a change in him in the days that followed. He remained distant, but sometimes she caught him watching her longer, his eyes less cold, more conflicted. One evening as she read to Lucas, Grant entered the room, a rare occurrence. "You did well today," he said, his voice low, referring to Mother's Day. "Lucas, he needed that." Evelyn smiled, her heart racing. "He needs you too, Mr. Whitmore," she replied, gentle but firm. Grant didn't respond, just nodded and left, but she knew her words had reached him, even slightly. Evelyn didn't push him. She kept caring for Lucas, quietly planting seeds of hope in the cold mansion. She baked cookies with him, flour dusting his hair. She helped him plant a small flower pot in the garden, promising to water it daily. And each time Lucas laughed, she glanced at Grant, hoping one day he'd let her past his invisible wall. But Grant, though stirred by her presence, kept his heart caged, fearing that if he opened it, he'd lose everything again. She didn't know that deep down, Grant was beginning to wonder if Evelyn was the light he and Lucas needed, or just another dream that would fade like Anna had. Evelyn Carter had become indispensable at the Whitmore mansion, despite still being a nanny by mistake. Lucas, the 5-year-old who once silently clung to his worn teddy bear, now laughed brightly, sang childish nursery rhymes, and held her hand while scampering through the garden. She brought light to him, something Grant Whitmore, his cold and distant father, hadn't managed in 5 years. But to Grant, Evelyn was a puzzle, a woman with soft brown hair, gentle eyes, and a patience that made him both grateful and uneasy. Since Anna's death, he'd built a wall around his heart, and each time Evelyn smiled at Lucas, each time she made his son happy, he felt that wall tremble, though he fought to keep it standing. Grant didn't want to admit Evelyn was changing him. He maintained his distance, issuing curt orders through Mrs. Helen and burying himself in work to avoid the emotions stirring within. But after Mother's Day, when he saw Lucas proudly show Evelyn to his friends, when tears fell for his son's happiness, he couldn't deny she was more than a caretaker. She was quietly warming the void in their home and in his heart. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn cared for Lucas with unwavering devotion. She taught him to make paper lanterns to hang in his room, told stories of beavers building dams, and painted vibrant pictures with him of a family in heaven. Lucas no longer called her Mommy, as he had that first time, but he called her Miss Ev with affection, hugging her tightly each night before bed. Evelyn knew Lucas needed her, and she began to feel she needed him too. His smile, the simple moments when he pointed at a butterfly in the garden. But with Grant, things were more complex. He still appeared fleetingly, always in crisp black suits, his voice low and sharp. Yet Evelyn noticed subtle changes. He no longer left immediately when she spoke, sometimes nodding or even replying briefly. "Lucas likes that painting," he once said when she showed him one of the boy's drawings. Or once, when she asked if he'd read to Lucas, he stood silent for a moment before shaking his head and leaving. Those small moments convinced Evelyn his wall wasn't impenetrable. Deep down, Grant was wrestling with himself. He saw Evelyn didn't try to replace Anna. She never spoke of becoming Lucas's mother or claimed that role. Instead, she quietly brought a new warmth, a gentle light he hadn't expected after the darkness of loss. Her patience with Lucas, her tenderness with his sorrows, and her prioritizing him, even at her own expense, made Grant wonder, why did a stranger like her care so deeply for his son? And why, each time he looked at her, did his heart race despite his efforts to suppress it? One Friday night, as New York's sky turned black with rumbling thunder, the Whitmore mansion plunged into darkness. A massive storm knocked out power across the area, and a thunderclap jolted Lucas awake. Evelyn heard his cries from the next room, rushing to him with the faint glow of her phone's flashlight. Lucas was curled up on his bed, clutching Teddy, his small face pale with fear. "Miss Ev, don't leave," he sobbed, tears streaming down his cheeks. Evelyn sat beside him, pulling him into her arms. "I'm here, Lucas. I'm not going anywhere," she whispered, stroking his hair. She held him tightly, feeling his small body tremble. To soothe him, she sang a lullaby her mother once sang, a slow, gentle melody about stars and the moon. Her voice wasn't perfect, but it was warm, like a soft blanket wrapping around Lucas. Gradually, his sobs quieted, and he nestled closer, his hands gripping her shirt. From the hallway, Grant stood silently, his flashlight casting a dim streak on the wood floor. He'd heard Lucas's cries and meant to rush in, but seeing Evelyn already there, he paused. He watched her hold his son, singing in the dark, her face gentle and patient despite the storm raging outside. For the first time in 5 years, Grant's eyes softened, as if he'd found a spark in his own darkness. He couldn't look away, not because she resembled Anna, but because she was Evelyn, bringing peace to his son, and perhaps to him. He stayed until Lucas fell asleep in Evelyn's arms. When she looked up and saw him, she gave a small smile, saying nothing, carefully laying Lucas down and tucking him in. Grant stepped inside, his voice low. "Thank you," he said, and this time, his tone wasn't cold. Evelyn nodded, her heart racing, but she didn't want to break the fragile moment. She left the room, leaving Grant by Lucas's bed, his eyes still following her through the dark. In the days that followed, Grant appeared more often. He no longer relied solely on Mrs. Helen, sometimes asking Lucas about his day himself. "What did you draw today?" he asked one evening as Lucas showed off a painting of a butterfly family. Lucas eagerly explained, and Grant, though awkward, tried to listen. Evelyn watched from afar, seeing he was trying, not just for Lucas, but for himself. He wanted to be a better father, but fear of the past still held him captive. One afternoon, Evelyn felt unusually tired. She'd stayed up late making a paper lantern for Lucas, and that morning she woke with a slight fever. She hid it, still taking Lucas to the garden. But when she sat on a bench, her head spun. Lucas noticed immediately. "Miss Ev, are you sick?" he asked, eyes worried. "Just a bit tired," Evelyn smiled weakly, but Grant, just back from the office, overheard. He approached, his gaze sharp. "You're not well," he said, not asking but stating. "Go inside and rest. I'll take care of Lucas." Evelyn started to protest, but his resolute look silenced her. She returned to the living room, lying on the sofa with a thin blanket. Moments later, she heard footsteps. Grant appeared, holding a steaming mug of ginger tea. "Drink this," he said, setting it on the table. "I'm not sure I made it right, but it should help." Evelyn, surprised, sat up and took the mug. The warmth spread through her hands and she smiled. "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. You didn't have to." Grant didn't reply immediately. He sat across from her, his eyes searching hers. After a silence, he asked, his voice low and slightly unsteady, "Why are you so good to us?" Evelyn froze. It was the first time he'd called her "you" so personally, and his question was raw, as if he genuinely needed to understand. She set the mug down, meeting his gaze. "Because every child deserves a loving family," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Lucas needs to feel that, and I think you do too, even if you won't admit it." Grant stared, his eyes wavering, as if her words had struck a hidden wound. He didn't respond, but the air between them shifted, no longer cold distance, but a fragile, breakable connection. Then, as if guided by an unseen force, he stood and stepped closer. He leaned down, and before Evelyn could react, he pressed a gentle, trembling kiss to her forehead. Tender, sincere, like he was testing the door to his heart after 5 years of locking it shut. Evelyn's breath caught. The kiss wasn't passionate, but its honesty made her heart tremble. Grant pulled back, his eyes conflicted, as if he couldn't believe what he'd done. "Rest," he said, his voice hoarse, turning away before she could speak. After that moment, Grant was no longer the same cold man. He joined Lucas's life more, reading to him at night, though his voice was clumsy, sitting with him and Evelyn for indoor picnics, even attempting cookies, resulting in a charred mess that made Lucas giggle uncontrollably. Evelyn saw he was trying, not just to bond with his son, but to open up to her. One evening, with Lucas asleep, Evelyn and Grant lingered in the living room, each with a coffee mug. Silence enveloped them, but it wasn't awkward. "You make Lucas happy," Grant said suddenly, gazing out the window where moonlight lit the garden. "I didn't think that was possible." Evelyn smiled, her heart racing. "Lucas is a wonderful boy. You just need to be there for him more. And let yourself be happy, Grant." He turned to her, his eyes deep with unspoken emotions. "Happy," he repeated as if the word were foreign. "I don't know if I deserve it." Evelyn placed her hand on his, gentle but firm. "You do, Grant. Lucas needs you happy, and I want to see you that way." Grant didn't pull away. He looked at her, and in that moment, part of the wall around his heart crumbled. Evelyn wasn't Anna, nor did she try to be. She was a new light, teaching him that love didn't mean loss, but rediscovery. In the days that followed, Grant and Evelyn shared more moments. Dinners with the three of them, afternoons taking Lucas to the park, accidental brushes of hands when passing plates. He was still afraid, still hesitant, but each time he saw Evelyn laugh with Lucas, heard her sing lullabies, he knew he was falling, and this time he didn't want to run. Evelyn, though unspoken, felt her heart turning toward Grant. She knew he carried Anna's scars, but she didn't want to replace her. She only wanted to bring happiness to him and Lucas, and each time he looked at her with softened eyes, she believed she was on the right path. Grant was changing, step by step, and Evelyn was the breeze clearing the clouds in his heart. But both knew the journey held challenges, and his heart, though opening, remained fragile as crystal. Evelyn Carter was no longer a stranger in the Whitmore mansion. She had become Lucas's light, the 5-year-old who once shrank in sorrow, now beaming whenever she told stories or taught him to draw. But more surprisingly, she was becoming essential to Grant Whitmore, the man who'd locked his heart away after his wife Anna's death. After the gentle kiss on Evelyn's forehead when she was ill, Grant stopped keeping his distance. He hadn't fully opened up, but small changes, warmer eyes, less sharp words, and more presence in Lucas's moments showed he was trying step by step. Evelyn sensed it, and her heart, though she tried to stay calm, stirred for the man with deep blue eyes and hidden grief. Evelyn didn't rush. She knew Grant carried scars from the past, and she didn't want to push him before he was ready. Instead, she focused on Lucas, filling his days with joy, and quietly created moments for the three of them to grow closer. She believed that with patience, Grant would find his way to her, not because she wanted to replace Anna, but because she wanted to bring happiness to him and his son. Grant's change became more evident during cozy dinners. Before, he often ate alone in his office or was absent for late meetings. Now he started joining Evelyn and Lucas at the table, initially just listening silently. Evelyn turned dinners into family gatherings, cooking simple dishes, pasta with tomato sauce, garlic toast, or chocolate chip cookies Lucas loved, and encouraging Lucas to share his day. "I drew a huge dragon today," Lucas exclaimed, waving his arms to mimic imaginary wings. Evelyn laughed, asking for details, occasionally glancing at Grant to invite him in. At first, Grant only nodded or gave short replies, but gradually he spoke more. "Does your dragon breathe fire?" he asked one evening, prompting Lucas to launch into a long tale about Knight Lucas battling dragons. Evelyn smiled, noting Grant's eyes no longer distant. He looked at Lucas with pride, and when his gaze met hers, a flicker of warmth passed through, as if thanking her for the moment. Dinners became routine. Evelyn tried new recipes, sometimes asking Grant's opinion, mashed or roasted potatoes. And he, though surprised, always answered, even if briefly. Lucas, the glue between them, pulled them into silly games like guessing dish names or pretending to be king of the kitchen. One night when Lucas declared Grant the cookie knight and draped a napkin over his head, Grant laughed, a deep, rare sound that stunned Evelyn. She'd never heard him laugh, and it was a melody that stirred her heart. Grant caught her gaze, and for a fleeting moment, they shared a smile, as if both realized they were building something beautiful. Beyond dinners, Evelyn and Grant spent more time together during outings with Lucas. One weekend, under New York's clear blue sky and soft golden sun, Evelyn suggested taking Lucas to a nearby park with slides and swings. Lucas was thrilled, tugging her hand, while Grant, initially hesitant, agreed to come. "To make sure he doesn't climb too high," he said, but Evelyn knew he wanted to be with his son, and perhaps her. At the park, Lucas ran around, swung on swings, and begged Evelyn to play Monster Chase. She laughed, pretending to be a monster, chasing him as he squealed in delight. Grant stood aside, hands in pockets, but his eyes followed them. When Lucas called, "Dad, be a monster too," Grant raised an eyebrow, but, at his son's pleading look, joined in, growling playfully and chasing Lucas. The boys' laughter echoed, and Evelyn, watching, couldn't hold back her smile. She'd never seen Grant so relaxed, so close, almost happy. After Lucas tired, they sat on a bench, sharing a tub of vanilla ice cream. Lucas, face smeared with cream, babbled about the strongest monster he'd defeated. Evelyn listened, teasing him, and Grant, though quiet, added a few words. "You sure the monster didn't win?" he asked, making Lucas puff his cheeks in protest. Evelyn laughed, and when she looked up, Grant was watching her, his eyes softer than ever. "You're good at making him laugh," he said, voice low. "I'm not." "You just have to try," Evelyn replied, smiling. "Lucas loves you. He just needs you there." Grant didn't respond, but his eyes showed he was listening, and she knew he was considering her words. Such afternoons became routine. They took Lucas to the park, the zoo, or strolled the neighborhood where maples blazed red in autumn. Evelyn and Grant talked more, first about Lucas's likes, then about themselves. Evelyn shared her Ohio childhood, building blanket forts with her brother. Grant, though reserved, spoke of camping trips with Anna, pausing when her name surfaced, as if fearing the pain of memory. A poignant moment came from Evelyn's idea, a memory box for Anna. She noticed Lucas loved his mother, but rarely spoke of her, as if fearing sadness. Evelyn wanted him to remember her without pain, and she believed Grant needed it too. One Saturday afternoon, she brought a small wooden box painted blue. Anna's favorite color, Lucas had said. "We'll put special things about your mom in here," she explained. "Whenever you miss her, you can open it and feel her close." Lucas was excited, and they began. He added a beaded bracelet Anna wore, a family photo from his infancy, and a note he wrote, "Mom loves me." Evelyn helped decorate the box with paper stars and glitter, sharing funny stories Lucas told, like Anna burning cookies but laughing loudly. Lucas giggled, and for the first time, he spoke of his mother without sadness. "Mom liked singing, but she was really bad," he said, chuckling. Grant at the door heard Lucas's laughter. He stepped inside, his eyes wavering at the box. "What's this?" he asked, voice low. Evelyn explained, and Lucas pulled him to sit. "Dad, put something in. What about Mom do you love most?" Grant froze, but at Lucas's eager look, he pulled a small photo from his wallet, Anna smiling in sunlight, her blonde hair glowing. "Your mom always brought light," he said, voice hoarse, placing the photo in the box. Evelyn watched, her heart tightening. She knew this wasn't easy for him, but he did it for Lucas and himself. When Lucas ran for more glitter, Evelyn whispered, "You did great, Grant." He looked at her, eyes full of emotion, and for the first time he smiled at her. A small smile, but enough to make her world brighter. One late autumn evening, New York's sky sparkled with rare stars. With Lucas asleep, Evelyn, restless, went to the mansion's rooftop, a small spot Mrs. Helen had shown her, with a bench and city views. She sat, breathing the cool air, when footsteps sounded. Grant appeared, white shirt unbuttoned at the top, holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa. "Saw you come up," he said, offering one. "Mind?" Evelyn shook her head, smiling. "I like company." They sat, silently watching the sky. After a while, Grant spoke. "Anna loved nights like this," he said, voice low. "She'd drag me outside to count stars, even when I wanted to work." He laughed, but his eyes shimmered with tears. "I never told anyone about her, but with you, I want to." Evelyn listened, her heart trembling as he spoke of Anna. Her laughter, her dream of a flower-filled home, her love for Lucas before he was born. He laughed and cried, letting memories flow freely for the first time. "You helped Lucas remember her without pain," he said, looking at her. "And you helped me find joy again. I didn't think I could." Evelyn's hand rested on his, her eyes teary. "You deserve joy, Grant. You and Lucas both do." Grant clasped her hand, his fingers tight as if afraid she'd vanish. "I'm scared to love again," he confessed, voice trembling. "But you make me want to believe I deserve happiness." Evelyn teared up, her heart overflowing. "I won't leave," she whispered, "if you let me stay." Grant looked at her, eyes deep, and under the silver moonlight, he leaned in, his lips meeting hers. The kiss was sweet, fervent, releasing 5 years of loneliness. Evelyn kissed back, her hand on his chest, feeling his heart race. They held each other, the stars above witnessing their budding love. After that kiss, Grant and Evelyn no longer held back. They moved slowly, respecting his past and Lucas' ascent to power, but their love grew clearer. Grant began holding her hand during Lucas's outings, hugging her when Lucas wasn't looking, whispering sweet words that made her blush. Evelyn, with her patience and gentleness, became his anchor, teaching him to love without fear. They knew the journey wasn't easy, but each of Lucas's smiles, each moment together, proved they were building a family, not to replace Anna, but to continue the love she'd started. Evelyn Carter and Grant Whitmore had overcome the invisible walls between them, finding love in simple moments with Lucas. The kiss under the moonlight on the rooftop marked a turning point. Grant, who had locked his heart after Anna's death, now held Evelyn's hand with tenderness and trust. Cozy dinners, park afternoons, and late-night talks had made them a family, though unofficial. Lucas, with his radiant smile and love for Miss Ev, was their bond. And Evelyn believed, despite the long road ahead, they were on the right path. But she didn't expect that. Just as happiness seemed within reach, a storm would test their love. The rift began with Grant's parents, Charles and Eleanor Whitmore, wealthy, conservative, and controlling of their son's life. Living in a lavish Connecticut estate, they rarely appeared since Anna's death, but wielded influence through calls and discreet demands. Upon hearing of Evelyn, a woman of unclear background, no pedigree, living in their son's mansion, they grew suspicious. To them, Grant wasn't just a successful CEO, but the heir to their fortune, and anyone entering his life required scrutiny. One Saturday afternoon, as Evelyn and Lucas crafted a paper kite in the garden, Mrs. Helen announced that the Whitmores were coming for dinner. Evelyn felt nervous, but told herself they just wanted to see their grandson. She wore a simple pale green dress, tied her hair neatly, and helped Lucas prepare a drawing for them. Grant, though trying to seem calm, was tense. "My parents, they're particular," he said, voice low. "Just be yourself, okay?" Evelyn nodded, smiling. "I'll try." But when the Whitmores arrived, Charles, stern in a gray suit, and Eleanor, in a silk dress with a sharp gaze, the air grew heavy. They hugged Lucas, praising his growth, but their eyes scanned Evelyn as if appraising an object. Dinner unfolded in the grand dining room, the crystal chandelier casting light on the walnut table. Evelyn tried to engage, asking about their travels, but their replies were curt, cold. When Lucas excitedly shared about Miss Ev and their kite, Eleanor interrupted. "Lucas, you should focus on studies, not crafts," she said, then eyed Evelyn. "You're the nanny, correct? Your role is to care for our grandson, not become overly attached." Evelyn froze, heat rising to her cheeks. She started to respond, but Grant spoke first, his voice firm. "Mother, Evelyn is more than a nanny. She's important to Lucas, and to me." Lucas nodded, squeezing Evelyn's hand under the table, but Eleanor only raised an eyebrow. "Important? Grant, you must be cautious. A woman of unknown background, living in your home, may not just want to care for our grandson." The room grew stifling. Evelyn clenched her fists, staying calm. "I love Lucas," she said, voice soft but steady. "I'm here for him, nothing else." Charles smirked. "Love? Miss Carter, you understand our family isn't a place for outsiders to enter easily. We must protect Lucas, emotionally and financially." Grant slammed his hand on the table, startling everyone. "Enough," he said, eyes blazing. "Evelyn isn't an outsider. She's brought happiness to Lucas, something no one, including me, could do." He stood, pulling Lucas and Evelyn away. "Dinner's over." In the living room, Lucas hugged Evelyn, whispering, "I don't want Grandma and Grandpa to make you sad." Evelyn stroked his hair, smiling despite her heavy heart. "I'm okay, Lucas. Don't worry." But when Lucas went to bed, she turned to Grant, eyes worried. "Are you sure about me?" she asked. "Your parents, they're not wrong to protect Lucas." Grant took her hands, his gaze unwavering. "I'm sure, Evelyn. You're the best thing that's happened to us." He pulled her into a tight embrace, but Evelyn couldn't shake the growing self-doubt. She had no status, nothing but her love for Grant and Lucas. And the Whitmore's words cut into her confidence like a knife. In the days that followed, pressure from Grant's parents intensified. They called frequently, sent letters via lawyers, and even summoned Grant to Connecticut to discuss Lucas's future. They didn't outright demand he end things with Evelyn, but their intent was clear. She didn't belong in the Whitmore family. Grant resisted, but Evelyn saw him grow wearier. He worked later, grew quieter at dinners, and though he still held her hand, she sensed his struggle, not doubting her, but fearing his family's power and wealth could complicate things for Lucas. Evelyn began questioning herself. She loved Grant and Lucas more than anything, but if her presence caused trouble, should she stay? Eleanor's word, outsider, echoed in her mind, making her feel she didn't belong in Grant's world. She didn't want to burden them or let Lucas be caught in family conflict. Though it broke her heart, she started believing leaving might be best for them. One evening after Lucas slept, Evelyn sat in the living room, writing a letter on blue paper, Anna's favorite color, as a nod to their family. She wrote, "Dear Grant and Lucas, I never thought I'd find a family like you. Lucas is my sunshine, and you, Grant, make my heart race every day. But I don't want to be why your family fractures or why Lucas faces unfairness. I love you both, and so I have to leave. Let Lucas grow in peace, and you, Grant, keep being the wonderful father you're becoming. You'll always be in my heart. Love, Evelyn." She folded the letter, tears streaming down her cheeks. She left it on the dining table for Grant to find, quietly packed a few belongings, and took one last look at Lucas's room, her heart shattering. She kissed his forehead, whispering, "I love you always." Then she left the mansion, returning to her small Brooklyn apartment. The next morning, Grant found the letter. His hands trembled as he read, his heart constricting. He rushed to Evelyn's room, but she was gone. Lucas, waking to find Miss Ev missing, cried, clutching Teddy and asking, "Where's Miss Ev, Dad?" Grant, at a loss, hugged his son, feeling a void larger than ever. Evelyn wasn't just Lucas's caretaker. She was the woman he loved, the piece that completed their family, and he'd let her go without a word. Meanwhile, Evelyn tried resuming her old life, but it felt empty. Her small apartment was cold without Lucas's laughter or Grant's gentle gaze. She worked at a cafe to get by, but each night she clutched a scarf Lucas gave her and wept. She wondered if she'd made the right choice or was punishing herself for lacking the courage to stay. 3 days later, an unexpected event changed everything. Lucas, unable to bear Evelyn's absence, took action. At preschool during recess, he slipped away, carrying a small backpack with a drawing. Mommy, Daddy, and me. 3 figures holding hands under a starry sky. He'd overheard Mrs. Helen mention Evelyn's Brooklyn address, and with the boldness of a 5-year-old, boarded a bus, clutching a scribbled note of the address. Luckily, a kind woman on the bus noticed him alone, helped him reach the right place, and alerted the school. Evelyn was washing mugs at the cafe when the doorbell chimed. She opened it and gasped, seeing Lucas, backpack slipping off his shoulder, face flushed from running. "Lucas!" she cried, kneeling to hug him tightly. "What are you doing here? How?" "I don't want you to go," Lucas said, tears falling. He handed her the drawing, voice choking. "This is my family. You're my mommy. Don't leave me and Dad." Evelyn sobbed, holding him close, her heart breaking with love and pain. Meanwhile, Grant was frantic. The preschool called, reporting Lucas's escape, and he raced from his office, heart pounding. He called Mrs. Helen, checked everywhere Lucas might go, and when he recalled Evelyn's apartment, he sped to Brooklyn. Arriving, he saw Evelyn and Lucas on a cafe bench. Lucas clinging to her, Evelyn stroking his hair, tears glistening on her cheeks. Grant burst in, breathless. "Lucas!" he called, rushing to hug his son. Lucas nestled into him but held Evelyn's hand. "Dad, I want Miss Ev to come home. I want us to be a family." Grant looked at Evelyn, eyes filled with pain and resolve. He knelt before her, taking her hand, voice trembling. "Evelyn, I can't live without you. You're not a burden. You're everything to us. I lost Anna, and I can't lose you. Please come back." Evelyn sobbed, her heart overflowing. She looked at Lucas, then Grant, knowing she couldn't leave them. "I don't want to go," she whispered, hugging them both. "I love you, Grant. I love Lucas. I want to stay. Forever." Grant pulled her into an embrace, his lips brushing her hair, and Lucas, nestled between, beamed. The Mommy, Daddy, and Me drawing lay on the table, a promise they'd never part. Though Grant's parents remained a challenge, he knew he'd face them, for Evelyn and Lucas were the family he chose, and he'd let no one tear them apart. The storm that threatened to tear Evelyn Carter and Grant Whitmore apart had passed, leaving a clarity neither could ignore. After Lucas bravely escaped school to find Evelyn, clutching his Mommy, Daddy, and Me drawing, Grant realized he couldn't imagine life without her. The confrontation with his parents' doubts and Evelyn's sacrificial decision to leave only solidified his certainty. She wasn't a fleeting presence, but the foundation of the home he and Lucas had lacked. Evelyn, too, had found her place, her heart irrevocably tied to the boy who called her Miss Ev, and the man whose once closed heart now opened for her. The pieces of their lives were coming together, and Grant knew it was time to make their bond eternal. The late autumn sun cast a golden glow over New York City, painting the trees in vibrant orange and crimson. It was a crisp Saturday afternoon, and Evelyn, Grant, and Lucas visited the small park near their neighborhood, a haven with a bright red slide and creaky swings Lucas adored. The park had become their sanctuary, where laughter rang out, where they played and felt their connection as a family. Lucas ran ahead, his sneakers kicking up dry leaves, while Evelyn and Grant followed, their hands occasionally brushing, a quiet intimacy in their shared smiles. Evelyn wore a simple cream sweater and jeans, her brown hair shimmering in the sunlight. Grant, rare in casual attire, sported a navy jacket and scarf, looking more at ease than ever. Lucas shouted, "Miss Ev, push me on the swing!" And she laughed, jogging to help. Grant watched from a distance, his heart warming at the sight. Lucas's laughter echoing, Evelyn's gentle voice encouraging as she pushed the swing higher. He reached into his pocket, touching the small velvet box he'd carried for days, and knew the moment had come. The idea of proposing had taken root after Lucas ran to Evelyn's apartment. That night, holding his son and seeing the love in Evelyn's eyes, Grant knew she was his future. He'd once feared love, believing it led only to loss, but Evelyn proved otherwise. She didn't replace Anna. She built something new, a family from healing and hope. He chose the park for this moment, not just because Lucas loved it, but because it symbolized their journey, a place of joy where they learned to be together. As the sun began to set, casting an orange-gold glow across the playground, Grant called Lucas over. "Buddy, come here a sec," he said, his voice calm but thick with emotion. Lucas hopped off the swing, running to his father while Evelyn followed curious. "What's up?" she asked, tilting her head with a playful smile. Grant took a deep breath, his eyes locking onto hers. He dropped to one knee on the patchy grass by the swings, and Lucas's eyes widened, as if sensing something big. Evelyn's breath caught, her hand covering her mouth as Grant pulled the velvet box from his pocket and opened it, revealing an elegant ring. A single diamond on a delicate gold band, glinting in the sunset. "Evelyn," he began, his voice low and trembling, with the weight of emotion, "I spent years thinking I'd never feel again, that I didn't deserve to. After Anna, I thought love was gone forever. But then you walked into our lives. You didn't just care for Lucas. You brought my son back to me. You taught him to laugh, to love, and you taught me I could love too." He paused, his eyes shimmering, and Lucas bounced on his toes, clutching Evelyn's hand. "Anna gave me Lucas," Grant continued, his voice breaking slightly, "and I'll always hold her in my heart. But you, Evelyn, you gave us a family. You brought hope, and you made me believe in tomorrow. I love you, more than I thought I could love again. I want to spend every day making you as happy as you've made us." He held up the ring, his eyes never leaving hers. "Please, let me love you for life. Will you marry me?" Evelyn's breath stopped, her vision blurring with tears. She looked at Grant, kneeling before her, his face open with a sincerity and vulnerability she'd never seen. She looked at Lucas, his eyes sparkling with hope, his small hand gripping hers. Grant's words, "Anna gave me Lucas, you gave us a family," sank into her soul, filling every void with warmth. She'd come to this city with a broken heart, seeking meaning, and now she'd found it in her love for these two. "Yes," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Grant, I'll marry you." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she nodded, unable to contain the joy and love surging within. Lucas cheered, jumping up and down. "Yeah, now we're a real family," he shouted, wrapping his arms around Evelyn's waist. She laughed through her tears, pulling him close, while Grant stood, his eyes glistening. He slipped the ring onto her finger, His touch gentle but firm, then pulled her into his arms. Their lips met in a kiss, soft at first, then deepening with a promise of forever. It was a kiss that held everything: the pain they'd overcome, the love they'd found, and the future they'd build. Lucas tugged their sleeves, giggling. Me too, he insisted, and Grant and Evelyn laughed, pulling him into a three-way hug. They stood there, entwined, the playground fading as the world narrowed to just them. The ring on Evelyn's finger gleamed in the last rays of daylight, a quiet symbol of their commitment. When they parted, Lucas grabbed Evelyn's hand, inspecting the ring with awe. "It's so shiny," he declared, then looked up at her. "Miss Ev, are you really my mommy now?" His voice was small but hopeful, melting Evelyn's heart. She knelt, cupping his face. "I'll always be here for you, Lucas," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're my family, and I love you so much." Lucas beamed, hugging her again, and Grant watched, his chest swelling with gratitude. He'd never imagined this. A complete family, not despite the past, but because of the love they'd found through it. Grant took Evelyn's hand, his fingers brushing the ring. "I meant every word," he said softly. "You've given us everything, Evelyn. I'll spend my life showing you that." She smiled, leaning into him, her head resting on his shoulder as Lucas ran back to the swings, calling for them to watch. They stayed at the park until the sky turned pink and gold. Lucas insisted on showing off his super swing skills, while Grant and Evelyn took turns pushing him, their laughter blending. Occasionally, Grant caught Evelyn's eye, and they shared a look that said more than words. A promise, a vow, a love that had weathered storms and grown stronger. Back home, Lucas raced inside, shouting about telling Mrs. Helen the news. Grant held Evelyn back at the door, pulling her close. "Thank you," he whispered, his forehead against hers, "for choosing us." She smiled, her fingers grazing his cheek. "You and Lucas are my choice, Grant. Forever." They kissed again, slow and tender, sealing the moment as the first stars twinkled above. The following spring, the garden behind the Whitmore mansion bloomed vibrantly, red roses, white hydrangeas, and lush ivy draping the wooden fence. It was here that Evelyn and Grant chose to hold their wedding. Not in a lavish hall or under city lights, but in the familiar space where they'd played with Lucas and shared their first moments as a family. They wanted a small, intimate ceremony with only their closest loved ones. Mrs. Helen, a few of Grant's friends, and some of Evelyn's former colleagues from Ohio who flew in to witness her special day. Evelyn stood before a mirror in her room, her simple white wedding dress hugging her figure, its train adorned with delicate lace flowers. She opted for no veil, letting her brown hair fall naturally, accented by a single white flower. Mrs. Helen, eyes shimmering with tears, adjusted her dress. "You're the most beautiful bride I've ever seen," she said, voice choked. Evelyn smiled, hugging her. "Thank you for always being there for us." Lucas, in a tiny navy suit, burst in, holding a small box. "Miss Ev, I got something for you." He opened it, revealing a necklace with a star-shaped pendant, a gift he'd made with Mrs. Helen's help. "So you remember Mom in heaven," he said, and Evelyn teared up, kneeling to hug him. "I'll wear it always, Lucas," she whispered, fastening the necklace, the star gleaming against her chest. Grant waited in the garden, his heart racing as he eyed the white silk ribbons draped on trees and wooden chairs arranged in an arc. He wore a light gray suit with a blue tie matching Lucas's outfit. As music began, a soft violin melody, he looked up and his breath caught. Evelyn appeared, holding a bouquet of hydrangeas, her eyes finding him in the small crowd. Lucas led as the junior groomsman, tossing rose petals along the path, his face beaming. When Evelyn reached Grant, he took her hand, his fingers lacing tightly with hers. "You're stunning," he whispered, voice hoarse. She smiled, eyes twinkling. "You're not bad yourself." They chuckled, and Lucas squeezed between, holding both their hands, making the guests laugh. The officiant, an old friend of Grant's, began with simple, heartfelt words. Grant and Evelyn exchanged vows, their voices trembling but resolute. "I promise to love and protect you, Evelyn, through sunny days and storms," Grant said, eyes fixed on her. You're my home, and I'll spend my life keeping that fire burning. Evelyn, tears streaming, replied, You and Lucas are my world. I promise to stand by you both, to love and build our family, forever. They exchanged rings, simple gold bands engraved with forever inside. Lucas, not to be left out, presented a red ribbon he tied around their hands, saying, So we're always together. The crowd applauded, and Grant kissed Evelyn, a sweet, deep kiss, while Lucas cheered, Yay! Party time! After the ceremony, they and the guests enjoyed an outdoor reception. Lucas ran through the garden, showing off his family ribbon to everyone. Evelyn and Grant danced under hanging lanterns to Can't Help Falling in Love, holding each other close, whispering words of love. As the party wound down, the three stood in the garden, holding white balloons. This is for Mom, Lucas said, looking skyward. They released the balloons, watching them soar, as if sending love and thanks to Anna in heaven. Evelyn held Grant's hand, feeling him squeeze hers, knowing Anna was smiling somewhere, happy their family had found light. A year later, the Whitmore mansion brimmed with laughter and new sounds. Evelyn, now Evelyn Whitmore, stood in a pastel-decorated nursery, cradling a baby girl with light brown hair, Ava Anna, named for Evelyn's mother and Anna. Beside her, Grant held a baby boy, Ethan Grant, with blue eyes mirroring his own. The 3-month-old twins were an unexpected gift, and each day Evelyn and Grant felt they were living a dream. Lucas, now 6, sat on the floor reading a picture book to his siblings. Don't worry, he whispered, stroking Ava's hair. Mommy and Daddy will always love you, and so will Big Brother Lucas. Evelyn smiled, tears glistening as she watched the boy who once called her Mommy at their first meeting, now embrace his role as a responsible big brother. Grant set Ethan in his crib, stepping behind Evelyn to wrap his arms around her. We did it, didn't we? He whispered, kissing her hair. She leaned into him, nodding. We did. A real family. Outside, the garden remained vibrant, where they'd vowed to be together. Lucas ran out, tugging Evelyn and Grant's hands. Come see the flowers. I planted a tree for Ava and Ethan. They laughed, following him to the garden, where a small sapling stretched toward the sun. It was their symbol, a family grown from loss, nurtured by love, and forever enduring